Good morning, Caw Prairie, and welcome to message number 2 in our sermon series, Family Vacation. Today, I have a question to get us started with, and I'd like you to put your answer in the chat box. That is, have you ever been stuck somewhere while you were traveling? Maybe it was an airport because of weather. Maybe your plans got canceled. Maybe you broke up with your girlfriend or boyfriend, and then you didn't know whether your plans were going to be the same as they were before. What have you been a part of that has forced a delay in your plans? Go ahead and write it in, and there'll be a prize. I'm sure we'll send you some sort of trinket of thanks if you have the most awesome, and if it's really good, we might film a testimonial and hear what happened. So anyway, I want to tell you about a trip that I got delayed on, that Laura and I got. Well, I should say, Laura and I traveled together. I was the only one who felt seriously inconvenienced. You see, for some reason, can't remember all the details, we were driving to see relatives in New England, and the big highlight for me was we were going to Stowe, Vermont to go skiing. Now, Laura enjoys skiing, kind of, a little bit. In the afternoon when it's warm and there's plenty of time to go warm up and read a book in the lodge. I have a little bit more intense relationship with skiing. So what happened is we're on our way, is it I-90? We're heading out to New England, and there's this huge snowstorm near the Great Lakes. Was it Lake Erie? Whatever the one is up by Buffalo. So Buffalo, New York is snowed in, and we were not planning on staying there. We were going to go a couple hours farther so we'd get closer. We could get into Stowe early the next day and start skiing. However, it was a maddeningly blinding snowstorm. We had to find a random motel somewhere, and we were snowed in for probably 24 hours in a motel outside of Buffalo, New York, which meant our plans got delayed. We missed our first night wherever else we were going to be, and we got into Stowe the next day super late at night. Now, I think I'd pre-ordered passes or something. All I can remember is I was desperately anxious to go skiing. Well, it was dark by the time we got there, and I'm not a great skier. I can do like hard blues and super easy blacks, but there was only one that I can remember. There's only one slope that was well lit, so that was the one that was open at night, and it was a tougher black. Anyway, I got up to the top, but I should say I got up to the top by myself because Laura decided, I can't do that. I'm just going to stay home. I'm like, okay. And she's like, really? I'm like, yeah. We were newlyweds, so this was probably a reality check for her. I'm like, I'm in it for me, babe. There's skiing out there. So I said, you've got a book, honey, you'll be fine. She said, you're right. So she stayed home, stayed at the motel and enjoyed herself. And I went skiing by myself in an unfamiliar ski resort on a hard black diamond run, probably in rental skis. I was so scared. I remember there were better people than me zooming all around me or doing the moguls, and I was petrified. It was way steeper than I thought. It was way colder than I had anticipated. I didn't wear enough clothes, and I was not having any fun. And I remember thinking, I wonder if I sat here, if somebody would come rescue me. I wonder what I'll tell Laura if they take me down into an infirmary or whatever you take people that are scared and, I don't know, maybe snowed their pants. I was so unhappy and so frustrated and thought to myself, I didn't know the phrase then, but it's something I heard from Pastor Chris and others in Team World Vision. You can go faster alone, but you go farther together. In this case, I went slow and not very far because I insisted on doing it by myself. So I want to talk to you about what it's like to have a delay in your plans, and then what happens because of it. Oh, I should also mention, this is a ski sweatshirt. It's not from Stowe. It's from Winter Park Resort in Colorado. This is the Vasquez Cirque, which is like a double black death sink for people who either grew up in that sort of danger or, like me, it was the only shirt that was double XL back when I wore double XLs. I actually had this on once in Colorado, and at my brother's restaurant or something, and somebody came up and said, oh man, the Cirque, I love that. And I said, yeah, I haven't done that. And they didn't hear me. They were still talking. And then he said, wait, you're from Kansas? And then he pointed at this like, really? I'm like, oh, no. I haven't done that. I just bought the t-shirt. So anyway, whatever your journey is in life, wherever vacations you have been on, if there has been a delay, this sermon is for you, because delays sometimes are what God uses for a divine teaching. So today is Pentecost, the celebration all around the world that historically is the second most important holiday in Christianity. Now, here in America and most of the West, and increasingly all around the world, Christmas is number one, right? Because that's got all the cultural fun to it. But for most of Christianity's history, it was Easter and then Pentecost is number 1 and 2. Pentecost is the receiving of the Holy Spirit by the disciples and other apostles in Jerusalem, and the sending out of them to build the church by proclaiming the gospel to the world. Pentecost happened 50 days after Passover. Passover, the night that Jesus was arrested, and then the next night crucified, and then raised from the dead the Sunday, the day after the Sabbath, that Passover weekend. Okay, so 50 days later, this happens, Pentecost. See, the disciples had come from Galilee to Jerusalem for Passover. It was like going to be a big trip, but it was just a trip, right? And then they had this huge delay because their leader got arrested, executed, then rose from the dead, and then he appeared to them in all manners and multiple manners and times to give them instructions and told them to wait. Okay, so then they waited. They waited until Ascension Day, which was the 40th day when he ascended into heaven. And before he ascended, he told them to keep waiting, that he was going to send his Spirit. So they waited again, and it was the 10 days later on Pentecost, the festival, that the Holy Spirit came, and this 50-day delay came to an end. Let me read it for you. It's on Acts chapter 1, and starting verse 12. Then the apostles returned to Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives, about a distance of about a half mile. When they arrived, they went to the upstairs room of the house where they were staying. Here are the names of those who were present: Peter, John, James, Andrew, Philip, Thomas, Bartholomew, Matthew, James, son of Alphaeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas, son of James. They all met together and were constantly united in prayer, along with Mary, the mother of Jesus, several other women, and the brothers of Jesus. During this time, when about 120 believers were together in one place, Peter stood up and addressed them. We don't have to go into this particular talk, but what I wanted you to hear is they were hanging out, they were waiting around in a room, not just the main disciples and the women and some of Jesus's family, but they had as many as another 100 people in the room with them. This was one crowded Airbnb, right? They might not get their deposit back. There was a lot of uncomfortable things happening while they were waiting, and yet they trusted in God that the discomfort they must have been experiencing together physically and emotionally because of the fear of the authorities and the confusion about what was happening next, they still devoted that delay time to prayer. And then, Acts 2, 10 days later, on the festival day of Pentecost, all the believers were meeting together in one place. Suddenly there was a sound from heaven like the roaring of a mighty windstorm, and it filled the house where they were sitting. Then what looked like flames or tongues of fire appeared and settled on each of them. And everyone present was filled with the Holy Spirit and began speaking in other languages as the Spirit gave them ability. At that time, there were devout Jews from every nation living in Jerusalem. Time out, they'd also come to Jerusalem for the Pentecost celebration. When they heard the loud noise, everyone came running, and they were bewildered to hear their own languages being spoken by the believers. But others in the crowd ridiculed them, saying, "They're just drunk, that's all." And then Peter does another great sermon, great speech. So in this little episode here, we see a long delay of a quick change of plans. And then, as what happens when people get frustrated or something new happens, there was probably some embarrassment by the apostles and some mockery and discouraging things from many in the crowd. So, the Jews, though, were used to this. They knew their national history. They knew the Exodus. They knew that faithful people who follow Yahweh are told to wait for promises. The promise is fulfilled. They're told to hurry up and do something and then wait some more. Hurry up and wait some more and then hurry up. They were not indignant. They were not angry that the Lord was asking them to wait. Compare that to how we Americans operate. I mean, I get annoyed if I pick the wrong checkout line. I try to put my car in the middle of two gas lines. Well, all right, I sometimes do. I want to be your pastor, right? So I should behave. I want to put them in the middle of both lines so I can decide which car is going fast. I sometimes make judgments about who gets out of the car and puts their gas in first. I'm like, okay, this person's going to be slow. I'm going to go the other one. I don't want to wait. And most Americans don't want to wait for anything. I mean, just look at the whole COVID thing, right? We don't want to be told what to do and we don't want to wait. But the Jews had much more patience and much more faith that God had a plan when things got slow, when there was a delay. Which brings us back to the story of the Exodus last week. So we ended last week with the pillar of fire and pillar of fire by night, pillar of cloud by day, leading God's people out of Egypt. Now we're going to skip over the crossing of the Red Sea. That is like a whole big sermon deal on its own. But I want to stick to the theme of what a vacation, what a trip, what a journey would be like. And that's why we're settling into the phase of the Exodus that I call the potholes and potty stops. In a nutshell, God's people in this part of the Exodus are going to face challenges, they're going to get bored, they're going to get thirsty, hungry, and tired. In other words, parents who've taken any kids on a vacation, or maybe just yourselves, they're going to get cranky. But when we're cranky, God can crack open our hearts and use us for something new, to teach us something new. And I think you're going to be learning something new as we're on this journey together. Exodus 16. Then the whole community of Israel set out from Elim and journeyed into the wilderness of Sin, between Elim and Mount Sinai. They arrived there on the 50th day of the second month, 1 month after leaving the land of Egypt. There too, the whole community of Israel complained about Moses and Aaron. If only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt, they moaned. There we sat around pots with meat and ate all the bread we wanted. But now you've brought us into this wilderness to starve us all to death. Parents, you've heard this from the back seat too, haven't you? Are we there yet? I'm bored. Why did we do this trip? Can we go home now? Or the most pernicious and annoying thing, hearing your children go, as if you hadn't put a lot of effort and no small amount of money and a lot of prayer, hopefully, into planning this vacation. And now, instead of being grateful and rolling with the punches, faithful, they're just being, well, like me or you, like we would be if we were in the back seat. You know, now pretend that those kids in your back seat are bitter, grumpy adults. In fact, not just adults in your family, but sketchy malcontents and ne'er-do-wells that you barely know. Then you understand what it was like for the people on the Exodus. You see, I talked last week about the Back to Egypt Committee, right? This group of people, a growing number of people among the freed slaves and the rabble, as we mentioned last week, who keep talking about, well, you really aren't a good leader. We should go back and do it different. We should go back to where we were and start our life over again. You know, I call that like nostalgiitis. When we look back at the past and imagine that it was so much better than the present, and imagine that we can go back and enter it again. I mean, well, you can go back home, but you can't go back into the past, right? Things are going to be different, and they seem to forget that. I mean, Facebook is like that. For me, I scroll through the Facebook feeds of old college friends, high school friends, friends from other churches, and I think I'm seeing the very best of what they want the world to see. And sometimes I get caught up into it, like, oh man, life was so good in college or high school, and I forget that it's nostalgiitis on my part, thinking that I could be like that again. And then I realize, you know, what I was like back then, it's pretty much the same way I'm like now. And I think I'm going to have to just deal with the who that I am now if I want the now to get better. This nostalgiitis that is so pervasive. Even now after COVID's starting to wind down, right? I mean, a lot of us, we've been working from home a lot, and now maybe our company, our office, our boss, they want us to come back to the office. And then we're like, oh, but it's so nice at home. But while we were at home, we're like, man, I miss the office. There's all these times when we are feeling wistful about the past, even if we're not being realistic. And for those of you that are watching here online, it's going to be like that when people come back here to church, right? They're going to have remembered things one way, and they're going to come back and it's going to be different. Not necessarily bad, in many cases better, but it's going to be different. And that's nostalgiitis is something I can see happening here with the exodusing slaves out of Egypt. And just like parents on a vacation, when people are getting cranky or complaining about what's happening, usually there's a reason, and parents want to fix that. But if we want to be like Vacation Parent of the Year, we also want to remember it might be good if they took part in fixing the problem for themselves. And that's what God did here. So let's keep reading. Then the Lord said to Moses, look, I'm going to rain down food from heaven for you. Basically, he meant the manna, this bread-like substance in the morning, and then bring quail in the evening for protein. Each day, the people can go out and pick up as much food as they need for that day, and I will test them in this to see whether or not they will follow my instructions. On the sixth day, they will gather food, and when they prepare it, there will be twice as much as usual. So to carry them over into the Sabbath, the seventh day. Now, during COVID, a lot of us don't want to follow the rules. We were protesting about the mask. We were protesting about this and that. It's natural and it's human not to want to follow the rules. And what happened here in the Exodus was that a lot of the people didn't follow the rules. Most of them did. They had seen God's faithfulness and wanted to honor God's faithfulness by responding obediently, but not everybody. You're thinking like toilet paper hoarding and things like that, hoarding Clorox from Costco. There was something about us that we're like, I don't want to leave stuff on the ground if I could use it someday. That kind of stuff happened back then too. But just like coaches on a team or parents in the front seat, God used this episode of disobedience, of selfishness really on the part of the Hebrews to teach a lesson. Now, luckily, there was no smiting of sinners, right? I mean, we've seen plenty of smiting going on in the Old Testament. Nobody died, just maggots in the manna jars, which for the Old Testament is a pretty light punishment. But if you're thinking about it, you can't keep track of all the time that God smited so-and-so or did this for that. But you can keep track of the one time when people's food got maggots in it, right? That's a pretty memorable message. And I know that would make a lasting impression in our family. So anyway, on difficult journeys, I would say this is lesson 1. On difficult journeys, God shows us grace so that we learn to trust Him. And when it comes to family vacations, we ought to show our children grace, the same grace that we've been shown by God, because we want them to trust us. And we want to model that we trust God in the first place. That we're grateful to God for the gifts He's given us, and that we will trust that His hand is not going to go closed, but stay open and generous. Now we're going to move to Exodus 17. At the Lord's command, the whole community of Israel left the wilderness of sin and moved from place to place. Eventually, they camped at Rephidim, but there was no water there for the people to drink. So once more, the people complained against Moses. "Give us water to drink," they demanded. "Quiet," Moses replied from the front seat. "Why are you complaining against me? Why are you testing the Lord?" I love it when Moses is feeling like put upon. He's like, okay, you're not just testing me, you're testing God. God's mad at you, kid, so cut it out. Not sure that's the best parenting tool, but anyway, what Moses was expressing was this huge disappointment in their lack of faith. He's like, guys, I just got reintroduced to Yahweh myself. I'm new to this too, but look what He's done. He sent the plagues, He got you out of Egypt, He saved all of our backsides at the Red Sea, He did all this thing, and now you think He's going to leave you to starve? Come on, have some faith. Well, that's not what it says literally in Scripture, but that's what's going through Moses' mind, and I think what he's trying to communicate. Verse 3 says this, "But tormented by thirst, they continued to argue with Moses. 'Why did you bring us out of Egypt? And you are trying to kill us. Are you trying to kill us, our children, and our livestock with thirst?'" Those livestock, by the way, are what they picked up from the Egyptians on the way out. Remember, they gave them all their treasure and goods and wealth when they left. So good thinking ahead, God. Anyway, then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What should I do with these people? They are ready to stone me." And then the Lord said to Moses, "Walk out in front of the people, take your staff, the one you used when you struck the water of the Nile, and call some of the elders of Israel to join you." I love that little phrase, call some of the elders to join you. You see, the people need to know that there's more than just Moses, quote, running this show. There's more people who are invested in and responsible for their well-being. I mean, that's how it is in a church, right? It's not just a pastor who's running the show. It's a group of elders, in our case, a group of elders, a group of trustees, an amazing staff. We're all doing this, and we all have faith in God, and we all have a vision for the future, and that's encouraging. Or it should be, because there's many, many more heads, and that's a lot better than one. And on a family vacation, I want you to extrapolate to that situation too. If you've got a couple of kids, the younger children are going to feel safer if the older kids are responsible, if the older kids are doing the rules, if they're not rebelling against the parents. When things are aligned, when there's more leaders than just one, the people who are younger, the people who are newer, the people who are more on the outside, they feel safer because they know that there's peace, structure, organization, and integrity. Parents, that's one of the challenges I know that we face when we raise our kids, right? We've got older children who want more independence and older children who grow into the rebellious stage sooner, but we still have younger children who are needing them to be more grown up than maybe they want to be. But sometimes on a vacation, opportunities happen where our older kids can step up and the bigs can kind of minister to the littles. And, I think that also changes the big siblings too. And I think that's what happened there in the Exodus, right? Moses got to deliver the people and give them water, but he didn't do it as a one-man show. He did it with the support, the backdrop, and the teamwork of a group of elders. In fact, it's a lot more likely a lesson is going to stick, right, if the children do some of the teaching. And I think that was God's goal there. So anyway, let's keep reading. Verse 6, "I will stand before you on the rock at Mount Sinai. Strike the rock and water will come gushing out. Then the people will be able to drink." So Moses struck the rock as he was told, and water gushed out as the elders looked on. Moses named the place Massah, which means test, and Meribah, which means arguing, because the people of Israel argued with Moses and tested the Lord by saying, is the Lord with us here or not? I'm like, ouch. Imagine, parents, being on vacation or being on a trip with your kids, heck, just being at the softball game while your kids are playing, and you get dragged into work, right? You have to answer a call, you've got to look something up on your OneDrive and send it to a colleague or something, or maybe you're just Facebook scrolling, right? Or gramming. Something is distracting you from being with the family. Imagine if one of your kids came up to you and said, "Hey, Dad, are you on this vacation with us or not?" Ouch. I imagine that when God heard that, the accusation hurt, right? Even if it was arguably fair. And so he wanted to respond by showing, yes, I am with you. And parents, how important that is for us. And that's why I'm so charmed in this story when I see that God kept trying to be graceful to these demanding, impatient, and cranky Hebrews. And yet he kept his promise faithfully that he would keep them safe. Now, there's other times when it's a little bit more like, but at least in the beginning of Exodus, he's trying to show what his personality is. And that's why sharing leadership is so important, right? It's not just Moses, that has to stay faithful. It's the elders who have to stay faithful so that the whole body feels secure. When everyone shares responsibility, everybody thrives gratefully. When everybody shares responsibility, everybody thrives gratefully. So, pretend you're the kids in the back of the car and Pastor Dan is driving. You might be getting squirrely, because already I've talked about Pentecost and I've given you 2 lessons. If it's on the East Coast, a lot of you are watching from the East Coast of the US, right? It's getting lunchtime. If you're somewhere else, who knows what time it is. But still, you're saying, all right, this might be enough, Dan. Thanks for the sermon. I'm going to tell you, like I would my kids, wait, there's more. And with my children, usually what they needed was, a snack or a stop at the restroom. You can handle that on your own. I've got no snacks for you. Or they wanted to see or hear something that was either about dragons, dungeons, torture, weapons, or some sort of bloody battle. That I can give you. You're welcome. So, Exodus 17, verse 8 and following. While the people of Israel were still at Rephidim, the warriors of Amalek attacked them. Moses commanded Joshua, choose some men to go out and fight the army of Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand at the top of the hill, holding the staff of God in my hand. So Joshua did what Moses said. He commanded what Moses commanded and fought the army of Amalek. Moses, Aaron, and Hur climbed up to the top of the nearby hill. As long as Moses held the staff up in his hand, the Israelites had the advantage. But whenever he dropped his hand, he's getting old, remember, the Amalekites gained the advantage. Moses' arm soon became so tired, he could no longer hold them up. So Aaron and Hur found a stone for him to sit on, and then they stood on each side of him and held up his hands, so his hands could hold steady until sunset. As a result, Joshua overwhelmed and defeated the army of Amalek in battle. All right, if your kids are like mine, they might ask at this point, well, if Moses was so tired and God so faithful, why didn't he just zap them? He's good at that. Fair question. I think that's because the ultimate point of our journeys in life, heck, the ultimate point of this Exodus journey, wasn't really to smite every enemy, although sometimes that was necessary. And sometimes the point wasn't even to win the battle. You've seen plenty of quotes like this on Pinterest or maybe bathroom stall walls in a philosophy department, right? It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. Pastor Roger Barkley has some great insight here that I want to share, and I'm going to quote him. I know that sounds strange, but just like the point of the journey ultimately is not to arrive, in this encounter the point is not to defeat the enemy. The point is, number one, to become unafraid of the enemy. Okay, time out, Roger. See, this is the first battle they had to fight, right? The last battle that they were going to have to fight, which basically meant they'd be slaughtered, God fought for them and drowned the Egyptian troops, right? So they haven't really been to war yet. And number two, they had to learn how to be an army, or I guess more transferable language, they had to find their identity and their calling. So God wanted them to go through the hard work, to endure the challenge, even endure the pain, suffering, sacrifice, and I'm sure endure the fatalities of becoming an army together so that their identity as a people would be strengthened. If God had magically done the battle for them, and this is Roger Barkley again, if God had magically done the battle for them, the Israelites would have remained in fear, and they would have felt inferior and vulnerable as fighters. Facing your fears and fighting your own battles is the only way you can keep your freedom, and I would add, and gain the confidence to follow your calling. Speaking of calling, this whole thing of Exodus started out with fire. Remember that? What was the fire that started the Exodus? Put it in the chat box if you know, right? It's related to Moses and shrubbery that burns for 1,000. Remember, on Mount Horeb, otherwise known as Mount Sinai, the burning bush spoke to Moses. The burning bush that God occupied and introduced himself to Moses as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then we also started today talking about what Pentecost was. Pentecost was the descent of these flames of fire, these tongues of fire, on the heads of each of those 120 plus people who were gathered in that room. And in both cases, God uses the heat and the light of flames and the indwelling of the Holy Spirit to put people on a road, to put them toward a future. In fact, the very book name Exodus is Greek for the road out of. Ex means out and hodos means road or way, right? So Exodus is the road out, and the Christian people, their first name that they called themselves and others called them was people of the way, hodos, right? So what can we learn? What can we learn from this Pentecost Sunday looking at the Exodus? My words to you are, we can learn that life is a journey, that we are on a journey, but we're not on a journey alone. Sometimes it feels like we're in the front seat, totally in control. I mean, God's maybe our co-pilot if we remember the song. But a lot of times we act like we're in the back seat and we're just throwing things up in the front when we're mad. We're getting mad at somebody because they're getting too close or they touched our side. God longs for us to be on a journey that's much more substantial, much more meaningful than that. And that, my friends, is why God called us to be His church. Because alone, we can go faster, but together, we can go farther. And where we're going is we're a church that's on a mission to change lives with Jesus' love. And we do it by trusting Jesus with our whole lives, by growing so we can become more like Jesus and more useful in His work. And then we give our lives to bless the world in His name with the gifts and identity and calling that He's given us. There's no better way that you can live your life than by living it on the road, hos odos, not the road out of, but the road toward. That's proshodos, if you want to know some Greek. The road toward a future with God. And here at Caw Prairie, as we're getting ready to have our full reopening and getting back to a lot of the best things of the past, but doing new things that are different than the past, we need you involved. We need you here online. We're not giving this up. We're not like, say, we're done here and we're going to go like do in person. We're going to stay here with you, and we need you to grow into the church who's going to change lives with Jesus' love. And if you'll let us be your partners on the road with you wherever you are, we'll be honored, grateful, and we hope to live as a church a life worthy of that calling. Thank you for being part of our journey together, and thank you for being with us the second Sunday. Pastor Chris is coming to bring the next sermon next week, and I wish you a blessed and holy Pentecost as you serve Jesus with your family this week.